Hello, everybody. As most of you know, I'm Grace. This is a really unstable thing, but that's okay.
Either stands for stable.
It's okay. We aren't stable either, so.
But God is.
But God is. So, like I said, I'm Grace. As most of you know, I'm a senior here. I'm a mathematical sciences major. These are some of my pals from WPI, from CBF. There's a picture from Girl Study where we drew one day because I'm a part of Girl Study and I really love it. My mom and sister are in the picture too. That's my mom over there. We love to cook together, and my sister. And that's one of my dogs. I have another one, but he didn't make the cut, unfortunately. So I grew up here in Massachusetts. I grew up in a Christian home. Grew up going to church, went to a Christian school like many of you, and I learned a lot about God while I was growing up, whether it was from my family, through Sunday school, through school itself. And it made sense to me. I understood it. I understand who God was, that, you know, He created the earth, He created us, and we were supposed to live to Him. Like, that made sense to me. I was like, okay, cool, logical. And I just continued to learn more about Him, but it kind of stayed as head knowledge. And as I got older into middle school and was learning more, it kept just building as head knowledge. You know, I learned about science, I learned about cells in class, and I learned about God and the stories of Jesus. But I wasn't really translating that into my heart. And I started to just kind of do things because I knew this is what I'm supposed to do as a Christian. I answered questions because I know this is what I'm supposed to say as a Christian. And it was very easy to kind of move through life with like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, but it never really hitting me. And then at the end of 7th grade, my parents decided we were going to move back to India. And so they sent my dad and I over to see if I would be able to transition, kind of as a testing year. And that year ended up being one of the hardest years of my life. I struggled a lot. I was faced with a lot of difficult situations that I had to get through by myself. And I just kind of pushed through it myself. I didn't really think about God. I didn't think about my relationship with Him, how He could get me through it. I was just kind of like, this is a hard situation. I need to get through it, so I'll get through it myself. I didn't take time to read my Bible. I wasn't really paying attention in church. I couldn't understand most of the services I was going to. And it wasn't that I was like, oh, I hate God. I don't believe God will get me through this. I just simply wasn't thinking about Him. I wasn't applying all that knowledge I had learned. I was like, I need to get through this. I'm struggling. I will power through. And at the end of that year, my parents decided we weren't going to move to India. And so we came back. And the transition back was really hard. And it highlighted a lot of effects that year had on me, both emotionally and physically. And I was really struggling coming back. In this transition back at the same time, my mom had been here for the year that I was gone, and she had started learning about refugees in the area. The population of refugees was growing in Worcester. It was and still is one of the highest populations in the Northeast of refugees. And she wanted to get more involved with refugees because my mom immigrated here 30 years ago, and she knew what it was like to be in a new place and have no one there. And the American family kind of took her under their wing, and so she wanted to be able to do that for others. So we started getting connected with refugee families, hosting events, having them over, building friendships. And while we were doing that, I was connecting with the kids. I was spending time with the kids. And when I was first starting to meet these families and these kids, they would ask me, oh, how many years ago did you come here? Which is a question that was often asked to refugees, either between refugees or someone asking. And the first time I was kind of like surprised because I was like, oh, they think I'm a refugee. And so I would answer like, no, my parents came here back then it was like 25 years ago, but I just came back from spending a year in India. And I never really equated my year in India as something a refugee would relate to, but it was something that we were able to build upon. I think my struggles were not quite as hard and as drastic as theirs. My experience was very minimal compared to theirs, but I still understood those feelings of feeling alone and feeling isolated and uprooted and not really feeling like you belong where you are. And through this, we were able to share our experiences, and I was able to bond with them and really build a strong trust with some of these kids. And as I was building these relationships with them, I was helping them with their homework, helping them with their social skills, and just kind of giving the love and attention that they were not receiving, that they needed. And part of this was also telling them about God and about Jesus, because that's what I knew was right. And I would tell them how oftentimes Jesus is compared to as a refugee. He was in a land that was not his own, and he was treated as an outsider. But as I was telling them more and more about God, it really made me reflect and think, well, do I really believe this? Am I applying this to my life? Or am I just sharing the head knowledge that I gained? And so that made me really reflect back on my faith and on that year. And that really difficult year had now become something that was allowing me to bond with these kids and ultimately help them. And I was starting to see the hope from that experience. And so I started looking at my relationship with God and building it for myself, not for my parents, not for the people around me. Spending time with God, reading the Bible, taking what I knew in my head and applying it in my heart, and allowing myself to build that relationship with God and understand that I wasn't in this alone and I couldn't be. I started making him the center of my life, and as I started to grow again in my faith and in my service, it really highlighted to me the gifts that God had given me of being able to work with kids, and also the burden that he had placed on my heart of specifically working with refugees and other kids in the city, of kids who just were not getting the attention, the love, the guidance that they needed because they just couldn't be provided in their family circumstances. So out of this horrible experience, God was able to give me something that is really the center of my life right now, being able to serve kids and be able to just show them the love of God and teach them about God. So that's why today I want to talk a little bit about service and the role of service in our lives as Christians. So to start out, I'm going to talk about a little bit why we serve. This is James 2:14 through 17. Would anybody like to read it for us?
What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warm and filled, so giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead.
Thank you, Emily. So in this passage, James is talking about faith and works, and he's not saying that you need faith. He's not saying that you need works to be saved, and that works lead to salvation, but that a natural result of our faith should be works. If our faith is not being followed by works, how true is our faith? And he highlights too of, if we say these things and we say, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving the things they need, what good is that? In John 15:1 through 6, he talks about the fruit. Would anyone like to read this passage? If not, I can read it. Oh, Trevor. Sorry. There's more, don't worry.
Not to read. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. That's right, yes. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself, unless it abides in the vine, neither can you, unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered and thrown into the fire and burned. Mike.
Yeah, burned. So here John talks about how we are supposed to be bearing fruit when we have our relationship with God and we're abiding in him, when we are spending time with him, learning about him, we're supposed to bear fruit. And we can only bear fruit when we abide in him. And if we're not bearing fruit, again, we're thrown in the fire and burned. That's pretty harsh. So fruit, works, are supposed to be a natural result of our faith. And so ultimately that's the root of why we serve, is because we are rooted in Christ, and he is the one who fills us with the love and the mercy to be able to pour that out onto others. We have so many examples in the New Testament of Jesus serving others too, in the way that he lived his life. So most importantly, the root of why we serve others is because of our faith and because of the love that God has shown for us, and that he's commanded us that we have to have fruit of our faith. So then going on, who do we serve, right? We're supposed to serve. What does this look like? In Matthew 25, would anyone like to read this one? It's kind of long.
Sure. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people from one another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did you see a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly, I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me, naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they also will answer, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you?" Then he will answer them, saying, "Truly, I say to you, as you did not do to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." And these will go away in eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life.
So here Jesus is talking about when we have to stand before God, and he talks about serving, how serving others is serving God. And he uses the wording, "You did it to the least of my brothers, so you did it to me." And he talks again later about his brothers. And so here Jesus is talking about fellow believers, our fellow body. We are called to serve them as members of our bodies, as brothers of Christ, brothers and sisters of Christ. We'll come back to this passage because it's pretty juicy. But to build on who else we're supposed to serve, there's this passage in Luke. Would anyone like to read it? Thanks, Kate. Oh,
Sorry.
If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same amount. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful even as your Father is merciful.
So here we're called to love and serve our enemies as well. And I remember reading this passage when I was younger, and I thought this meant your enemies, the people who are super mean to you, the mean middle school girls. Those are my enemies. Those are the people Jesus is telling me to love. And yes, he's telling me to love them, but he's talking about more than that. He's talking about enemies. He's talking about unbelievers. We're called to love all of them, even if they aren't followers of Christ. So we can see these two examples of that we're called to love believers and we're called to love unbelievers. And there's a quote I want to read from, did I put it up there? Yeah, from John Piper. It says, "We are drawn to show mercy to Christians because we see Christ in them, and we are drawn to show mercy to unbelievers because we want to see Christ in them. We help suffering believers because they bear the name of Christ, and we help suffering unbelievers in the hope that they will come to bear the name of Christ." So we have two motivations, right? But ultimately, we are helping the people around us, believers or unbelievers, because of Christ. So like I said, we're going to go back to that Matthew passage. And here, Jesus is talking about how all nations will be separated into two groups. The ones that fed him, the ones that gave him drink, the ones that welcomed him and clothed him, and the ones that didn't. And it's a pretty hefty separation for how he addresses these two groups, right? On one hand, he says to them, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." And to the other group, he says, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels." Those are two pretty big distinctions for how Jesus is going to react when we come before him. But it's very clear that he's calling us to take action, to serve in our works. We live in the city of Worcester. Worcester has a lot of need in it. Like I mentioned, the refugee populations, the low-income areas. We live in a city. All cities have so much need, and we're in the center of one. And some of those people out there suffering are members of the body. They are fellow believers, and they're members of our body. And we cannot be comfortable knowing that members of our body here are suffering, and we are not helping them. You know, if on your physical body, if one part of you is hurting, you're not just going to ignore it, right? Like, oh, my shoulder hurts, but like, I don't really care about my shoulder, you know? Like, at least like my head is good, my hair looks good, like that's okay, I can ignore that. But no, you have to tend to every part of the body, and when we know people in our body around us right there are suffering, we cannot be comfortable sitting here not doing anything. And on top of that, there are unbelievers suffering in the city that we're in. And how much more should we feel towards them that they're suffering and they don't have the hope of Christ in them? That we are able to give that to them. We're able to help them in their suffering, come alongside them, and they're right there. They're right next to us. They're all around us. There's no limit of need around us, and we cannot be so comfortable sitting here on our campus knowing that members of the body and members who do not know Christ are suffering all around us. And we're called to serve them. Christ came down as this perfect being to this dirty, evil earth to save us, to show us love and mercy. How much more should we be showing that love and mercy to the people around us? Like I mentioned, our root of our service has to be abiding in Christ. And when we abide in him and we continue to receive that love and mercy from him, then we're able to pour it out. We can be so overwhelmed by his love and mercy that we can show that to others, but it has to come from our rooting in our salvation. And Christ has called us to serve, right? And he didn't call us to serve, and he didn't die on the cross for us to say we're serving by being nice to our group partners, even though we don't like them. Not by just talking to the person in the room that's not talking to anybody, by helping a friend instead of doing our homework, sacrificing an hour on our homework to help someone else. Those are all things we should do, but I think he's called us to more. There are unbelievers who do those things all the time, probably do them better than I do, but we're called to more. We're called to be able to share this love and this mercy that we can only receive from Christ to others. And we're called to make ourselves uncomfortable. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be convenient. It can sometimes be overwhelming to think about all the suffering that's around us, whether it's in the world, whether it's in Worcester itself. There's just so much, and we're never going to be able to fix it. We're not going to be able to take it away. And that's why Christ has created us as a body, right? We're supposed to function together. He has given each and every one of us our own gifts to serve. He's given us our own burdens placed on our heart of how we should serve, who we should serve. And when we are spending time with him, when we're able to know our gifts and our burden, we're able to serve and fulfill our purpose. And when all of us are coming together as a body and each serving in our own way and the way we're supposed to, then we're able to look at this massive, like this overwhelming suffering and say, okay, we're in a body, we are going. There's people helping all different kinds of people, whether it's the environment, whether it's people, like there's just so much need, but that's why there's so many of us. And Christ has given each one of you a purpose, a burden, a gift for us to fulfill. So, like it mentions in this chapter, we're going to stand before the Lord, and he's going to say either we served him or we didn't. And friends, for those who aren't graduating in these next couple of years, at the end of your 4 years, I hope that you can stand in front of God and know that he's going to say, Come, you who are blessed by the Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Because if we just focus on our academics and things like that, and we come before God and he says, you didn't serve me, we can't say, well, God, I got an A in my classes. I was on the dean's list, God. I got a job. I got my dream job. I'm making 6 figures. He's not going to care. He's going to say, you didn't feed me. You didn't clothe me. You didn't give me drink when I was thirsty. And he's going to say, depart from me. And how heartbreaking will that be to hear? So, as we are all placed here, and for my friends that are graduating, we are going to a place where God has a purpose for us. He knows what he wants us to do there. And I pray that we can all find that. And as we come together, that we might be encouraged that God has equipped us, right? It can be an overwhelming task. Like, how do I do this, right? Where do I start? God has equipped us all, like I said, with a gift and with a burden. And once we can discern that, we can serve and we can grow as a body and we can grow the body together. If anyone has any questions about how do you start resources in Worcester, I would love to chat. I know a couple of things in Worcester, a couple areas, or if you just need chatting about how to get started, but I just want you all to know the importance of our service, whether it's in the context of the fruit of our salvation, but also our eternity, that we may be able to serve the Lord and stand in front of him proudly and hear the words, come you who are blessed by the Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. That's all. Those discussion questions.